Good evening and welcome to the F1 Stop Show. I'm your host Sam Oni, and with me tonight is Wes Spearman. Wes, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thanks. A bit under the weather still. Been uh, I had COVID the last few days, almost exactly a year on from where I got it first time last year in 2022, which is a bit coincidental. But other than that, yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Very well. Um, let's jump into it then. So we've had the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix last weekend. Well, 3 days ago, and it was Sergio Perez of Red Bull that came out on top with Max Verstappen astonishingly finishing second, despite starting the race in 15th place. So and Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso finished third on the podium, then got demoted to fourth, then got reinstated to third again. What is going on? Anyway, Wes, what did you think of the race?
I thought it was all right. Maybe not quite as action packed as Bahrain. But yeah, still overall decent-ish, I guess. I mean, for Verstappen to start 15th and finish P2 and give him another lap or two, he would have hauled in Perez for the race win as well. It's just incredible how quick that Red Bull is. There was one point, I think roughly in the middle of the race, where uh, lap 27, 28, thereabouts, I think, he'd already made it back up to like P3 or something. And he just sails past Russell, I think it was, with DRS. And you see Crofty saying, "Oh, that looks like F1 against F2," and no, that's no disrespect to the people who designed the Mercedes, because the Mercedes is still a pretty quick car. It's probably third fastest, second fastest, maybe. Probably too early to tell at the moment, but yeah, second or third fastest car on the grid. And for the Red Bull to just sail, yes, Max had DRS, but it just made it look so easy. And I mean, for him to come back up, gained what, 13 places in 20 odd laps in just over half an hour, 40 minutes of racing is just ridiculous. um, but yeah, I suppose the main talking point isn't about Verstappen, isn't really about Perez, even though he won the race, his fifth race win. It's got to be Alonso, P3 again. Yes, he started P2, but another incredible drive from the Spaniard. His 100th podium, and then, yeah, as you say, 99th, then back to
Yeah,
100th. So, yeah, the FIA messed up a little bit, I think, on that one. But yeah, it's still a great result for Alonso. It's a shame Stroll retired, I think, around about lap 2018, I think it was, brought out the safety car. Um, yeah, the FIA, I think, screwed up a little bit with Alonso there at the end of the race.
I mean, he, like you said, he wasn't he was incorrectly positioned. He incorrectly positioned his car into the grid slot, which is almost like parking. Just parking your car. Also, so I can see where the FIA gave him the penalty for that because it's almost like he's giving himself a slight advantage, but I don't see how it could have impact the other drivers behind him. Maybe I don't know, but the race itself. I mean, he was the first into turn one ahead of Perez. It was just pretty impressive, and I think one of the commentators said, I think it was Crofty. I was watching it on the highlights. He said, "There is still life in the old dog." I was like, well, that's great. It just shows that you know Alonso's been racing in F1 for what 20 years since 2001, so just over 20 years. Um, so he still knows how to race. He still knows how to compete, and you know I think there's a lot to come from him. If I had to make a quick prediction, I think Alonso, if he carries on like this, he will get at least 110 podiums. Or am I stretching it a bit?
By the end of the year.
Yeah, by the end
Oh,
of this 2023
oh,
season.
I mean, the way things are going, he's got 2 podiums in 2 races, so it could be 120.
And the
Yeah,
tenth,
I don't think
yeah, and like the 10th race off the top of my head is what? It's normally around Silverstone, Belgium, that kind of
Austria this year around 10.
Austria. Okay, so yeah, it looks, if they carry on like this, Alonso, Aston Martin, who knows? We're just waiting for that race win.
That I'd love to see. I'd love to see a race win from Alonso this year. I mean, 2 podiums in 2 races. I mean, if a Red Bull retires or both retire, engine problems, if they have a crash, then Alonso could be the first person to take advantage of that. Um, yeah, it's incredible how well he and Aston Martin have started, given the poor season Aston Martin had last year. Was it 7th in the constructors, I think? Feel a bit bad for Sebastian Vettel, given because if he'd stayed on just 1 year, he'd be in this car instead of Alonso, and we could see Vettel on the podium or winning races as well. But it's worked out incredibly well for Alonso so far. Touch wood, fingers crossed it carries on for the remaining 21 races or something. Yeah, I would love to see Alonso win a race this season, and it could well happen. As I said, it just needs a little bit of luck on Alonso's part and a mishap in the Red Bull camp. Yeah, Alonso or one of the Ferraris, one of the Mercedes is right is yeah next in line to pick up the pieces. Um, yeah, I think just going back to the whole sort of podium situation, I think yeah, as you say, he got that penalty for being in the grid slot incorrectly. He was too far to the left. Seeing the footage, yes, he was out of his grid slot. Um, I think he was then penalised later on in the race for essentially what Ocon got penalised a couple of weeks ago in Bahrain for incorrectly serving the original penalty, where one of the mechanics got to work too quickly on the car. Um, but from what I've heard, I'm not sure how true this is. That one of the mechanics sort of put the jack to the car. I think the rear jack was touching the car, um, which is the reason why the FIA then penalised him later on. But again, from what I've heard, I don't know how true this is, whether it's just Twitter or internet just making stuff up. Aston Martin then went to the FIA and showed them 7 previous examples of jacks touching the car while serving a penalty in a pit stop, and then not being penalised, if that makes sense, later on.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense.
And yeah, I think it was an hour or two after the race, they sort of reversed their decision to sort of reverse the original podium. So obviously, Alonso went up on the podium, did the whole ceremony. A little bit after that, obviously reversed the result, gave Alonso a 10-second penalty, I think it was, which obviously promoted Russell into P3. And then again, I think an hour or two, I think it was around about sort of 10 o'clock UK time. It was relatively late in the day. I'm not quite sure what that what that would be in Saudi Arabia, probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, they then reversed it again to give Alonso his podium back. So yeah, eventually after, well, he had 2 podiums in a day. Alonso pretty much, he's got as many podiums in one day in Saudi Arabia than he had for the last 2 years essentially, pretty much.
Well, it seems like Alonso and Aston Martin are have they've had a lot on their plate over the last 2 races. So the top end of the well race standings saw Red Bull and Aston Martin on the on the podium steps, but down the grid, like in the midfield of the pack, just some shout outs. Pierre Gasly of the Alpine, he finished in the top 10, ninth place, I believe. Hulkenberg, top 10, 10th place, 1 point for the Haas team. Pretty good. However, if you're like me, supporting Ferrari, you're not really going to be happy about their result. and I'm not happy about it either. Yeah,
It's a good job
six,
you're not a McLaren fan.
six,
I'm in pain these last 2 weekends.
yeah. I mean, sixth and seventh for the Scuderia drivers, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. Um, they didn't really have the best of races if you look at it. Quite poor. Um, I don't really know what it is. It's not like they're having any like issues, like as if Science is having issues with Leclerc or vice versa. I haven't really seen that over the last year or two between the pair. Um, I think it's mainly because of this is my view. I think it's mainly because of like you know they're having a lot of car problems, like a lot. Uh, yeah, and it's just a shame that we're not able to see them raise to their full potential.
Yeah, they have had car issues and obviously the infamous strategy issues that plagued Ferrari. Yeah, for whatever reason, they weren't at the races this weekend, pardon the pun. I think Leclerc actually qualified second, but obviously took that engine penalty after Bahrain to drop back to 12th, and I suppose had a decent recovery drive to finish P7. But overall, as you say, a pretty poor weekend for Ferrari to finish behind both Mercedes. Um, Only 14 points for them for the weekend. I think they're still third in, or might have dropped down to fourth now in the constructors. Yeah, 12 points behind Mercedes, who are level with Aston Martin now after Stroll's retirement. Red Bull way out in the lead already, 87 points ahead. Um, and yeah, just a poor showing for Ferrari. I mean, even Sainz actually qualified P5 behind Russell, Alonso, Leclerc, and Perez. Um, yeah, Jeddah suit their car? Maybe, maybe not. Going to Australia next weekend, another some more power track, if you like. Azerbaijan the week after again. Then we're going to Miami, where it might even out a little bit. Um, yeah, for whatever reason, they're just. I know Red Bull is so much quicker, but are they on the same level as Mercedes? Even maybe. I mean, they probably they. I think they finished higher than Mercedes in, or certainly Sainz didn't. Obviously, Leclerc retired. In Bahrain. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that battle between Ferrari and Mercedes pans out throughout the course of the season because I mean,
Mm.
I know we're only 2 races in, but Red Bull seems to be walking away with it again into the constructors, at least for the moment. 1 point in it in the drivers with Verstappen getting that fastest lap point in Saudi Arabia. Um, yeah, Ferrari, I mean, they need the cars to be reliable. They need to have good strategy. Obviously, new team principle, keeping things together, trying to move the team forwards again. But then at the same time, are Mercedes going backwards, perhaps? But it's a difficult one, and yeah, as I say, it'll be interesting to see how that battle for second place in the constructors does pan out.
I mean, Ferrari and Mercedes do have some issues, if you like, to sort out. Like with Ferrari, they've got their car problems. With Mercedes, however, it's, well, I'd say some eternal issues, like with Hamilton and his contract being up. Do you think? Do you think that's like having that's having any sort of problem with his actual racing? You know, on track with his races because his contract ends. You know, at the end of the season.
Um, I don't think so. I don't think that's playing on Hamilton's or Mercedes' mind too much. I think Hamilton will keep going. How old is he? 38 now. Second oldest driver. I think Alonso 41. Um, I think Hamilton's going to keep going until he gets that eighth. I mean, he deserves an eighth, obviously after Abu Dhabi 2021. Don't want to still bang on about that, but from what we've seen, the FIA can reverse decisions, I suppose, given Saudi Arabia. Anyway, um, yeah, I think Hamilton will keep going until he gets that eighth. I don't see Mercedes continuously being this slow, if you like, at least compared to where they were from 2014 to 2020, 2021, basically. I do see Mercedes being back at the front of the grid in the next few
Yeah.
years. And I do certainly see Mercedes and Hamilton challenging for race wins this season and for seasons beyond. I think if anything, from what Alonso's done so far this year, is that age is just a number. He's 41, oldest driver on the grid, and racing, as you say, for over 20 years in Formula One, and he's just got back-to-back podiums in what is seen as a midfield car. So
Yeah.
yes, Aston Martin have got a good car this year, but I think that might spur Hamilton on a bit, if you like. He historically hasn't had the best relationship with Alonso, so he'll be looking to beat him on track at least this season. And yeah, for him, if he can get that eighth, I know he's already statistically the greatest of all time in Formula One, but if he can get that eighth, have the most the standout most championships ever. I mean, it's just another. I can't remember the saying now. another sort of badge. You know, like those military people with loads of different badges on.
Yeah. Yeah.
another badge like that. But I can see Hamilton going on for at least another 2-3 years, I reckon, depending how Mercedes got on. But yeah, I can see him staying until he does eventually get that eighth.
I mean, well, let's just hope that Mercedes and Ferrari just get their heads together, get their cars together, and produce some good racing. Before we close, I just want to talk quickly on Red Bull and in particular Verstappen. So, as we know, Verstappen started 15th and finished second. However, he was unhappy with his result, saying, "Oh, I'm unhappy, with how I started, and you know, I, I, I wanted to win the race, all that kind of stuff." And I don't know. I heard on the internet somewhere that people were saying, "Oh, Verstappen should have been more, I don't know, smile a bit because you finished on a podium, like, you know." And his teammate Perez, top step. Uh, do you sense any kind of friction between the two drivers? And could this be an opportunity for Perez to have his own title challenge this season?
It's certainly a prospect for Perez, isn't it? Certainly the way obviously Red Bull has started, being so much quicker than anyone else on the grid. But yeah, as you say, Verstappen to be unhappy finishing P2 after he started P15 is, I think, says a lot about him, and that he does want to push to be the best. And as I said earlier, another 2-3 laps, and he could well have reeled in Perez for that race win. Yeah, I think I remember now looking back to the sort of the bit in Park Ferme where Perez sort of jumps into the Red Bull mechanics, and you just see Jos Verstappen standing there completely deadpan. It's like, oh yeah, well done, Checo. Where's Max? Where's my son? And it's in a complete contrast as to when was it last year or the year before, Mexican Grand Prix, when Perez was on the podium and Checo's dad was right up to Max, or just like so elated that Max had won that Grand Prix. And
Yeah.
it's completely different with Jos Verstappen, so much colder, so much raw. I'm only in this for my son Max. And if you look at their history, it's been pretty much that throughout Max's karting career. Jos has been pretty hard on Verstappen, coaching him to be the best, perhaps slightly controversial ways that he has done that. If you go into more details about it, I won't get into that on here, but yeah, it certainly is a chance for Perez to win the championship. But you'd think that the way Red Bull have sort of treated Verstappen ever since he's been there, pretty much since 2016, he has been their golden boy. He's been there, throw everything at Verstappen to get him to be world champion. And obviously that's worked the last couple of years. So yeah, I think if Perez does continue to win races this season, I think there will be a little bit of friction between the two. And that's going to be something that Christian Horner is going to have to sort out, because I don't see that being an easy job, because Max is a very sort of outspoken character, if you like. He seems quite combative in the way that he responds to certain things. So it'll be interesting to see if or what their relationship as a driver pairing does end up as if
Yeah.
Perez does carry on winning races and challenging Max for those P1s. Yeah, I think on paper, Perez, Verstappen, sorry, is the better driver. He's younger, I suppose, and Perez spent most of his career in the midfield. That's not to say he's a bad driver. I think Perez is one of the better drivers on the grid. Yeah, the way Red Bull have prioritised Verstappen, I think pretty clearly in the last 5-6 years, is pretty much says to me that they want Verstappen to win. I mean, it's a team you need a number one and a number two. And I know a lot of teams will say, "Oh, we treat them as equals," but behind the scenes that everyone knows who's their number one and their number two.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if it was down to me and I was a team principal, I would sometimes, you know what? I'd say to Perez, you know what, Perez, we just, you know, go out there, race your own race. If you have to, ignore team orders to have your own, sort of thing, then by all means. But at the end of the day, I do see why F1 is a personal sport and a team sport, because you've got the constructors, because it takes two to get your team to have the points. But then again, it's 20 drivers battling for one world championship. So it's every driver for himself. Um, yeah, I just hope we have more exciting racing. You know, teammates try and be teammates. And Ferrari, please get your act together because I am crying inside. Please, Carlos, uh, Shah, please, please, please. I want to see you guys on the podium, please. I mean, we've got Australia next week, so Ferrari, please get yourself on a podium in Melbourne. Thank you very much. Right, okay. How would you rate the race? How would you rate the race out of 10?
Um,
We haven't had a
I
safety
think
car yet. Should I be worried?
yeah, we have had a safety car in
Oh,
Saudi
sorry.
Arabia.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, when Stroll retired, there was a safety. They didn't show it. They didn't really show on the highlights, to be honest. Just like, oh yeah, Stroll's retired, safety car, right, race restart within the space of like 10 seconds. Yeah, I mean that's one out. Well, yeah, one of two so far. So I think the prediction is
So
still on.
that's 1 out of 12, is that? Yeah. Because I said
Oh,
halfway through.
yeah. So yeah, 12.
Hmm.
Yeah, overall, I don't think it was quite as exciting as Bahrain. There are a lot of periods where not a lot really happened.
Hmm.
Again, the race had its good moments in the start when Alonso led the race out of turn one. Verstappen's overtake on Russell. There's a couple of bits again, I think, involving Alonso. Race restart. Yeah, overall, not quite as exciting as Bahrain, so I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah. I think one thing I liked about the race was probably, I don't know, probably just Perez just having his own race. To be honest, I think that was a nice moment. But with the whole podium thing between Alonso and George Russell switching positions. Oh, F1, you never cease to amaze. Um, but yeah, in terms of like on track racing, there wasn't really any standout moments. As we know, Jeddah street track, one of the fastest, if not the fastest, street track on the calendar. Um, Not really much happened that would give you a wow moment. So I think I'd give it like a 6 out of 10. A 6 out of 10. Um, so driver of the day then. Who was your driver of the day?
And probably Verstappen, let's be honest. 15th to P2. I know he's in the fastest car on the grid, but to do that on, as you said, a street circuit and the fastest street circuit on the calendar, where there aren't many overtaking spots, is a pretty good effort. So yeah, Verstappen hands down for me.
Yeah, same here. I thought Verstappen just, well, on a street track, were he to win the race, that would have been probably the race of the season for him. On a personal note, I think that's, I think that's the lowest of any driver to have finished on a podium spot. Not exactly to like win, but from the lowest position to finish on a podium. Because I think Hamilton's done it once or twice. I think he did it
I
last
think
season.
Hamilton. I saw a graphic coming into the Grand Prix or after qualifying with like the lowest positions that people have won from, and I think Alonso was P15, but
Mm.
that was Singapore 2008, so that's got a bit of an asterisk on it with Crashgate and the whole. Who was it? Nelson Piquet being deliberately told to crash thing. Then Hamilton was 14th. I can't
Yeah,
quite remember when that was. I want to say Brazil in 1 year. I can't remember when it was. I'm not entirely sure. I could be completely wrong with Brazil. But yeah, for lowest starting position to finishing on the podium, I'm not entirely sure. I imagine it'll be a couple of places lower than sort of 14th, 15th, just because obviously
yeah,
you need to finish P3 to get on the podium. Yeah, I'm not entirely. Yeah, it must be around P16, 17,
yeah,
maybe
something like
18. I'm
that.
not entirely sure on that, but yeah, I mean, if Verstappen did win from P15, then yeah, it would have been, I think, joint lowest starting position to then go on to win the race, at least from current drivers anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of F1 Stop Show. Perez was joyful in Jeddah, whereas Alonso was biting his nails to see if he would claim his 100th podium despite being dropped to P4. But, you know, FIA gave him his podium position back. And so he's got 100 podiums in his F1 career. Well, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and you can also email us at F1stopshow. Yes, F1stopshow at gmail.com. Well, I don't know what happened. I almost thought I said the wrong thing. Um, but we hope you've enjoyed this episode, and do tune in next week because next week is Australia, Danny Rick's hometown. Australia. If you recap last year, Ferrari didn't have the best of races, in particular Carlos Sainz, but we keep that for next week. So I've been your host Sam Money, and this is a goodbye from me. Bye bye, and a goodbye from Wes.
Bye bye.
And we see you next week for Australia.